Hey everyone, welcome to the Restorative Reading and Writing for Wellness podcast. I'm Stephanie, a book-loving, notebook-hoarding reader and writer on a mission to change lives one book and one notebook at a time. On this podcast, we explore the power of books and notebooks as tools for wellness. Reading and writing can help us feel better and make life better too, and I'll show you how I do it. You'll find episodes exploring the research behind reading and writing for wellness, practical strategies to embrace your own restorative reading and writing, and you'll meet authors and special guests who help us take inspired actions in our own daily practices too. So grab a notebook and your TBR list and let's dive into today's episode. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Restorative Reading and Writing for Wellness podcast. I'm Stephanie Affinito, and I'm here with an episode that is a real-time exploration of my reading life, sparked by my own real-time book list. Now, lately on the podcast, I haven't normally been talking about the specific books that I'm reading or specific books that I think you should read, because I really want you to choose books that are perfect for you in this season of life. I want you to create your own ideal book apothecary. Now, that doesn't mean I don't have some book suggestions for you. I offer lots and lots of book suggestions in my private Substack community called Get Literate. But today is different. Today's episode is actually going to start with a book because it is the book that sparked this episode. And quite frankly, this deep dive of a rabbit hole down into this bookish line of research. So what is that book? What is the book that I have just finished reading? What's the book that I just finished talking about in book club with my Get Literate community? The title is Recipe for a Perfect Wife by Karma Brown. This is such a good book. Okay, so there are two characters. It's told in alternating perspectives. One is a woman back in the 1950s, and one is a woman in, let's say, the early-ish 2000s. Maybe it's 2010 or something like that. So these characters are not connected in real life, but they are connected by the house. The original character lived in the house in the 50s and had a very particular kind of traditional and not so kind marriage. And the person in the early 2000s is now living in the house after her with seemingly a better marriage. But as she finds the old magazines that the original owner kept, as she finds those letters that she wrote to multiple people in the house, and as she found her recipes, she's working her way through that life, through that era, and realizing that perhaps their lives aren't as different as they think. Now, I adored this book. It got me thinking on so many levels, but my favorite part of the book was the epigraph. Now, honestly, I did not know that this particular feature of the book was even called an epigraph. I didn't even know that there was a name for this particular feature that I loved. But basically, an epigraph is when at the start of each chapter, or perhaps some of the chapters, there is a quote or some sort of phrase at the start of the chapter that makes you think and kind of previews the content. This book had so many wonderful ones. And I say wonderful like tongue in cheek because some of these epigraphs were just downright horrifying. Because here's where these epigraphs came from. They came from real life books published in the early 1900s based on the advice of the time of how to be a perfect wife. They were both laughable and frightening, hysterical and maddening at the same time. I don't recall any of them specifically, and I have since passed my book forward, but the one that I can't get out of my mind was the advice to the woman, the new wife, about keeping her house clean. It said, one of the ways to have a happy husband and a happy life and to be a good wife was to keep your house clean. But you had to keep your house clean in such a way that it didn't disrupt the harmony of the home. Because if you did that, then that wouldn't make your husband happy. I mean, I think that one I probably spit my coffee out as I was reading that one. They were so hysterical and so unbelievable, but a quick couple of Google searches later revealed that yes, these were actually from real printed texts of our past. So they were such an enjoyable and maddening part of the story, and they really added to the story for me. And when I thought back about it, I realized I've always loved books that have done that. So just a couple of popular books that have epigraphs in them are The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, Homegoing by Ya Jesse, Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan, and one of my favorite young adult novels, As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow by Zulfa Katow. There's another one that I think this might be considered an epigraph, but it's more. It's a phrase and it's actually an excerpt of the main character's planner, which is why I love it so much. And that's The Bookish Life of Nina Hill by Abby Waxman. So there are books that have done this, but I didn't explicitly name what that particular craft move was on the author's part. And I didn't realize just how important it was to my reading life, how much I enjoyed it, and how much it deepened my experience. That's when I realized that this epigraph was a thing and I wanted to learn more. I wanted to investigate it a bit. And I did. I dove deep into what they were. I thought carefully about why they may matter to me. And then I thought, in a more bigger, in a bigger, on a bigger scope, how could it matter to restorative reading and writing practices that I love talking about so much? And how could we make use of them even more? And so that's where this episode was born. One book to one rabbit hole to one recording. So let's begin. Let's first start with a quick review of what epigraphs are. Okay, so technically, epigraphs are quotes or short sayings at the beginning of a book chapter, usually there to preview the content and to suggest the theme of the text that is to come. So it helps readers get a preview of the text, a sneak peek, so to speak, and just build anticipation on what this chapter might be about. So when I think of that definition and I think, why do these matter so much to me? Why do I love them? Well, I think it comes down to the fact that I love quotes. I love highlighting them. I love flagging them. I love putting a book dart on my pages around them. I love writing them down. I love putting them on sticky notes. I love compiling them in a notebook. I just love quotes. But I realize it's a bit more. I am a very type A, slightly anxious, need to control my surroundings and know what's going on kind of person. And so there's something comforting about that epigraph at the top of the chapter that says, here's a little bit about what's to come. Relax. You know what's coming next. Everything's planned out. Everything will happen the way it's supposed to be. There's just something comforting to my very stress ball like personality that finds those epigraphs helpful. And I just love thinking through them. I love taking that moment to think of that little tidbit and how it can help me be better because that's what restorative reading is. It's reading books that we feel like are matched to us for a particular reason, and then listening to those messages. And the epigraph gives me a chance to have a bite-sized message presented to me so that I can consider it. And so it really does have this perfect place in restorative reading and writing because these quotes or these phrases at the beginnings of our chapters, they can guide us in what's to come. They can ground us in what the text is going to say, and they can help us grow. So let's talk about a couple of ways that they do this specifically. I've got four ideas around this topic, why and how epigraphs are helpful when looking at our reading and writing life through a restorative lens. First, epigraphs slow us down. When you encounter an epigraph at the start of the chapter, right, you read it It's a bite-sized piece of text that you read and probably think about, consider. That epigraph has been carefully chosen to be the fewest amount of words with the biggest meaning the author can muster. And so that little moment offers you a chance to think and reflect and pause before you jump into the text. So it can shift us out of the let's just keep reading and let's get to the end of this book so I can put it on my reading log and celebrate it on Goodreads before the year ends and get my numbers up. It shifts us out of that rushed reading more into reflection, right? Finding a bit of margin, a bit of white space in our reading so that we can slow ourselves down, slow our minds down, and slow our nervous systems down too. Now, beyond that slowing down, I feel like second, epigraphs help us set the tone, set the mood, set the emotional landscape, set the energy from the book, right? Because they're preparing us, whether that's our reading mind or our reading heart, they prepare us for what's coming, right? These short little bursts of text usually carry some kind of mood. It could be soft, it could be jagged, right? It could be provocative and angering, or it could be really insightful and reflective. Whatever the mood of that quote or that phrase is, it usually foreshadows the mood that is going to come in that chapter, and from that mood, what those events might be. So, not only in the slowing down of the epigraph are we readying ourselves for what's to come, but by paying attention to that little blurb, maybe more explicitly than we have in the past, we are readying ourselves and all of those mirror neurons that could fire. We're readying ourselves for emotion and for feeling. And remember, it only takes 30 to 60 seconds of an emotion in order to start firing related chemicals in our body. So an epigraph could be all it takes to help you settle in to a good mood, or maybe a frustrated one like I had, but it just helps set the tone for the reading ahead. Now, I feel like these epigraphs also offer us some sort of lens or perspective to read the rest of the chapter in. It's like putting on a pair of book glasses, of literary glasses, and saying, okay, I'm going to read this chapter with this rosy colored lens, or this chapter with this yellow colored lens, or whatever you want to make up in your mind for what those lenses might be and what they could be differentiated as. But it's like the epigraph is giving us a focus or a perspective. It's helping us to read whatever is to come with a little bit more deeper intention because we know we are getting this foreshadowing. It is likely helping us to notice the themes that we're reading or maybe even look for them a little bit more. And we may see things, ideas, perspectives in the book that we might have otherwise missed because we weren't priming our brains to see them. And then finally, I feel like epigraphs just connect us as part of this bigger purpose, this bigger community, this bigger connection, right? Because it's the book that we're reading, but with these epigraphs, we're reminded that these books are meant to make us think. Okay, reading is like breathing in, writing is like breathing out. That wonderful quote from Pam Allen. And when we breathe words in and out, we cannot help but just share them with other people. And so I feel like epigraphs give us these little bite-sized things to share with others. And that is very true of The Recipe for a Perfect Wife by Karma Brown. I couldn't wait to tell everybody I saw that these little snippets were actually real. Like, can you believe it? Can you believe this? Look at this one. Look at that one. And I talked with a few people in relation to my reading, some of them who I convinced to read the book, which also made me happy. So epigraphs have a place in our reading life, but they definitely have a place in our restorative reading life. And if we think of those things I just said, slowing down, setting an emotional tone, offering us a perspective to read in, and connecting us to this larger conversation that we could have, all of those things can have beautiful benefits for a restorative writing life as well. So that's where I want to shift into. I want to talk about a couple of ways that you could take this idea of an epigraph and engage with them more intentionally. Really pay attention to them in your reading life so that they can harness your restorative reading rituals. So I've got 4 ideas for reading and 3 ideas for writing that I'd like to share. So, the first thing that we can do when we see an epigraph in our book is to mindfully pause and breathe. Use that epigraph as a stopping point, as a reminder that we set the tone and we set the pace, and we have time to indulge ourselves in this kind of slow reading. So take that opportunity to remind yourself of that. Maybe take a deep breath, read the epigraph, and just sit with it for a moment and try to identify what word is jumping out at me, or what phrase is jumping out at me, or what feeling am I getting from reading this. So, those epigraphs can be reminders to take our reading slow, to be really intentional, and to pay attention to the messages we might find in the page. Now, I think the epigraphs can also offer us this guidance, right? So we can use it as a compass, use it as a North Star, use it as an intention. So after we read that epigraph and we take that breath and we pause and think about what's standing out to ourselves, we could make a prediction for the chapter, or we could just set an intention for how we want to read this book, read this particular chapter only, even because of the epigraph that we see. So it can help us with that perspective that maybe we wouldn't have taken if we didn't get that first opening quote. Now, the third thing I think you could do when you see an epigraph in your reading is to return to it when you're done with the chapter. I did this a couple of times while reading Recipe for a Perfect Wife because I started to realize how important these epigraphs were to me. And so I'd read the epigraph and I'd stop and I'd think, and then I'd read the chapter with that particular lens, and then I would go back and I would try to see why this epigraph. How did what I've read align with it? How did it help me look at this information more? And maybe you're jotting things down in your book if you own it and you're up for that kind of thing. Maybe you're taking notes in your margins, but you're just keeping that epigraph in your mind while reading and giving yourself the chance to go back and reflect, to really think more deeply on the messages that that particular epigraph and chapter might have for you. And then finally, the fourth thing you could do, like I did so many times as a result of reading this book, is copy that epigraph and really any other quotes that jumped out at you into a journal. Maybe it's a sticky note, maybe it's a journal, but write it down. If it made you stop and think, if it changed the way you read that chapter, if it helped you reflect on something in your life, then I would say it's worth saving. So jot it down, even if it's a simple voice recording on your phone or something on Google Keep. Writing it down cements those grooves. It reminds us of what we want to focus on and pay attention to. So writing those epigraphs down can be the key that helps it go from the page of the book to the page of our notebook to the actual days of our lives. So there are 4 ways that you could consider using the epigraph to deepen your restorative reading practice. And now let's switch to writing. Okay, so one thing you could do when you see an epigraph, of course, you could read it and then reflect. But what about doing some writing before as well as after? So you turn the chapter, you see, or you turn the page, you see a new chapter, you see an epigraph. You might read it and stop and think and reflect, as I talked about above, but then write before you even read the chapter, right? Just free write. Why did I open this book at this particular time and get this chapter today with this epigraph? What might I need? Right? It slows the reading down, but it also helps you be more reflective and more intentional and just invite these new kinds of words into your being, so to speak. Now, another way you might use them is to collect them, right? You're writing them down, ideally, and use an epigraph to just set the tone for your day, right? So maybe in the morning you have an affirmation or you have some sort of repetitive sentence you say to yourself. You do some vision casting or dreaming. Maybe these epigraphs start to be these little bits of nuggets, these little bits of knowledge that you could remind yourself in the morning, right? Think of those calendars that have, a quote of the day or something to think about every day that you kind of tear off. My daughter loves Jen Sincero's calendar. I love it too. But think about those little calendars. You could start to collect your quotes and collect your epigraphs into a little connection, a little collection that can kick off your day and maybe even lead to some writing in your morning pages. And then the third way to consider using epigraphs, both in your writing life and in your actual life, is to make your own. What phrase would work for you as an epigraph? Okay, this is where we can get creative. We are all in a chapter of our current lives. We all just finished a chapter. We're all in a chapter. We all have a chapter ahead of us, right? Looking at our lives as a book with lots and lots of chapters is something that most bookish people can easily envision themselves doing. Well, if each chapter of our own lives started with an epigraph, what would it be? What would it be for this season of life? What would it be for a previous season? What might you want your epigraph to say? It can be fun to create those epigraphs for yourself, of course, borrowing the wisdom from some of the quotes that you've read, and use them to guide your own chapter, like your literal chapter of your life. You can collect them, you can say them, you can write them down, and of course, I imagine it will spark some writing and maybe even some visioning that could be really good writing to do at this time of the year. If you're listening to this in real time, it is towards the very end of 2025. So maybe you create an epigraph for 2025 and you think about what you would want your epigraph for 2026 to say. I admit I've been pondering this and I don't have an epigraph that I could share with you in relation to my own life yet. I'm throwing around a couple ideas and they just don't sound right. So if you want to keep up with me on what my epigraph might say about 2025 and 2026, or even just this current season of life that I am in, then be sure to take a peek at my Substack weekly literate love letter coming on this Friday, because I will officially have chosen my epigraph by then, and you can let me know what you think, and hopefully you will share yours too. So here's what I hope for you as we wrap up this episode. First, I hope you go find a book with some epigraphs in it. It is just a delightful, joyful, reflective reading experience. Then I want you to read one of them. I want you to find those epigraphs. I want you to pause and reflect, maybe do some writing about it. And I would love if you could choose an epigraph that you loved for yourself and share it with me. I love collecting quotes, and epigraphs are no different. So whether you borrow one from a book or you decide to write one for whatever chapter of life that you are in right now, find me on social media at AffinitoLit. Head to my Substack at litlife.substack.com. Find my own epigraphs that will be final in just a couple of days. Share yours with me there, and that's where you could keep getting more specific book recommendations as well. So we're at the end of the episode. Thanks for listening, everyone. I hope this gives you something to think about and something to try as you move through your own reading and writing this week. I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Restorative Reading and Writing for Wellness podcast. You'll find links to all of the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes and at alitlife.com. And if you want more, you might like to join my Get Literate Substack community. There, you'll find additional inspiration for your reading and writing life, like bonus podcast episodes, book calendars, monthly book clubs, notebooking inspiration, live events, giveaways, and much more. It's only $5 a month, and you get instant access to all of the previous content too. You can learn more at getliterate.co. But there's one more thing. If you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish and no bookish community too. Thanks for listening, everyone.